My very first Easter as a pastor, I was thinking very hard about my Easter sermon on the Saturday before Easter. And as I walked into the laundry room of our house, the door was partially open. And I was so busy thinking about my first sermon as a fully ordained pastor in a solo call that I walked straight into the door that was partially open. I got a huge black and blue eye. All of the white of my eye turned red. And I had my mind on divine things instead of human things. And I don't recommend doing it in exactly that way. Jesus, I do not think, when he says, take up your cross and follow me, or lose your life so that you gain the whole world, I don't think Jesus actually means that we should go around injuring ourselves because we're too busy thinking about Jesus. There is a misconception in the world also that taking up your cross is something that is about your personal suffering and the ways that you suffer. But here's the thing about the cross: Jesus didn't take up the cross and didn't suffer just for himself. Jesus didn't take up his cross and feel all of the pain in his body of the nails and the hands and the feet just for himself. When Jesus takes up his cross, it is on behalf of others. It is on behalf of others. When we are invited to be Jesus's disciples, we are invited to potentially take on some suffering that is realistic, but the point is to take on some suffering on behalf of others, not our own personal suffering. That is not our cross to bear. Our crosses to bear are the things that we do, that we sacrifice, that we let go of, that help us serve others and that help us care for others. Also, Jesus invites us today to lose our lives, to lose our lives. And I think that is really hard for many of us who have never been hungry, many of us who have never lived in our cars, many of us who have had our basic human needs met during our lives. I don't think that this is what Jesus means, but it occurs to me that as Miss Ann talked about self-examination and prayer, we might want to ask ourselves, would I be willing to be hungry for a day to make sure that other people had enough to eat? Would I be willing to invite someone who is homeless to come and live in my house and lose my own sense of comfort and security to make sure that someone else has a roof over their head? Would I be willing to examine myself and my worldview and the way that I understand the world and give up my sense of security or my sense of always being right if I discover that some of the things that I was taught to believe are actually causing other people to die or lose their lives? We have been forced this year to give up our church building in a lot of ways, and yet we are still here preaching the gospel. But Jesus actually asks us to lose our lives for the gospel. I don't know, but I wonder, what are we willing to give up? What are we willing to lose as a community for the sake of others, for the sake of preaching the gospel, for sharing the gospel? Jesus doesn't ask his followers to always be comfortable or to always be happy. Jesus says being a disciple is hard work. Jesus says being a disciple is about losing your entire life. I don't know what Jesus is calling us to do as individuals or as a community. I do know that Jesus does not call everyone to be a martyr, although Jesus certainly calls some people into martyrdom, but I don't think everybody. And I'm not sure that hurting ourselves, like walking into a door, say, or giving away so much that I end up homeless, actually helps anybody either, because those are not things that allow us to take good care of others and to maintain our ability to preach the gospel. It is really complicated. The questions that Jesus asks us when we examine ourselves, the questions that Jesus asks us to pray about, get really complicated and really deep. And the reality is that there are not easy answers. For those original followers of Jesus, you might remember that after Jesus was put to death, they all hid in a room together because they were afraid that they were going to be put to death too. The people who followed Jesus around were on the wrong side of the government, on the wrong side of the soldiers, on the wrong side of the religious authorities. They risked their place in the temple. They risked their place in the structure of the society. They risked that because they were a follower of Jesus, the rabble rouser and troublemaker, that they might also be jailed or put to death for being people who followed Jesus. We in the United States are not in that position today. No one is going around murdering Christians for trying to go to church on Sunday. But that doesn't mean that there might not be some things Jesus is asking to give up to preserve or increase or grow our ability to preach the gospel. One of the things when Jesus says that we should lose our lives so that we gain the whole world is, I wonder if that means opening our church up to people who are very different from us. I wonder if that means building something like a homeless shelter on all of the land that we have. I wonder if it means something like selling some of the land so that we have the ability to continue preaching the gospel into the future. I don't know. I don't know what Jesus is calling us to do. But I read this Bible passage. I read Jesus saying, if you are really my disciples, you will take up your cross. You will experience some level of suffering or some level of letting go of your comfort or of your security or of the way you have always had things. If you are really willing to be truly my disciples, you might have to let something go that you don't want to let go or that causes you pain. But the thing is, we let these things go on behalf of others. We let these things go in order to serve the world around us. We let these things go in order to serve our neighbors. We let these things go to take up a cross that brought salvation to the whole world. What is Jesus inviting us to let go of so that a whole new world opens up to us? What would it look like if things were radically different? I don't know. I imagine for lots of us, we would grieve. I imagine for lots of us, we would be angry as part of the grief process. I imagine for lots of us, we would be really uncomfortable. But then I also imagine maybe we would end up with a community that looked less homogeneous. Maybe we would end up with a community that looked more like the kingdom of God. Maybe we would get lots of new people with new ideas. Maybe we would give people a saving relationship with Jesus who otherwise would not be able to have one. There are a lot of lonely, hurting people in the world. There are a lot of people in the world who are desperate for good news. I would tell you, based on the majority of my friends my age who don't go to church unless they're actually pastors, that people are hungry for meaning. People are hungry for costly discipleship. People are hungry to belong to a community that has a mission, that has a vision. People are hungry to know that them belonging to a community makes a difference in the world around them. People are hungry to lose parts of their lives in order to gain the whole world. Jesus invites us into this Lenten journey of deep self examination, of deep prayer, of inviting ourselves to examine what are our individual and collective crosses that we take up, not on behalf of our own suffering, not because we were not very smart and walked into a door, but because we are there to serve others, because we're there to take care of one another. Because the message of Jesus, even if it's hard, even if we experience some personal level of suffering or some personal level of grief or some personal level of being uncomfortable, the message of Jesus is that when you center yourself in your discipleship and you center yourself in the gospel, we can do amazing things. And we can know deep down in our hearts, we can have the security deep within ourselves that we have been forgiven, that we have been loved unconditionally. And then when we're willing to let some things go so that we can gain some new things, we are able to share that unconditional love and forgiveness and deep joy that we know who we are and we can share that with others. I wish that I could wrap this all up for you in a neat little bow and I could say, this is exactly what Jesus is calling us to do. This is exactly the cross Jesus wants us to take up. This is exactly the life that Jesus wants us to lose so that we gain the whole world. And so we gain a whole other kind of life that is preaching the gospel in new ways to new people and in new situations. And I can't do that for you because we have to collectively be about prayer. We have to collectively be about discernment. We have to, as both individuals and as a group, as a church community, figure out what is it that Jesus is specifically calling us to do. Today is your invitation to do that. Today is your invitation to think about what are you willing to give up for the gospel? One of the things that I say sometimes is if I have to be homeless for Jesus, I will be, although I would prefer not to be. And the reality is, I've never been homeless, so I don't entirely know if I actually mean that. I have always had people who provided me food and given me enough to eat. It's hard to know if I would be willing to actually lose my life to that degree. All of us are called to be disciples of Jesus. All of us are called to take up crosses on behalf of others, to care for the world around us. And we are called as the community of LCMM to maybe lose some things so that, like Jesus says, we can gain the whole entire world. We can gain a deep sense of our own salvation, a deep sense of our forgiveness and unconditional love, and a powerful way to get behind that we can share that with the world around us. Even if we have to lose things, we gain everything. Thanks be to the Jesus who invites us into discipleship so that we can know with security that we are disciples, that we know the unconditional love, forgiveness, and joy of Jesus, and that with Jesus by our side, we can absolutely share that with others. Thanks be to God. Amen.